What's going on, guys? This is Lior with Compass out of Boston, and welcome back to my channel. Now, this is going to be my second video of 2021, and what I thought I'd do with this video is actually talk about how Boston's going to be different in 2021, right? Obviously, a lot of things have transpired over the last 6 to 9 months in 2020 with COVID and politics and everything. So I thought I'd give you guys an update of what lifestyle is truly like in Boston today. And we'll talk about everything from, are people still living in Boston? Are they moving out? Is there stuff still going around in the area, right? Are there still things happening? Are people still going and exploring the rest of New England? We'll also talk about things like traffic. And of course, we'll touch base on prices and affordability around the area as of today. So with that, let's get at it. What's going on, guys? My name's Lior, and as I said, I'm with Compass out of Boston. And like I said, we're going to be talking about how things have changed in living in Boston in 2021. Now, before we dive right into it, as always, guys, two quick things. Number one, if this is your first time on my channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button for me. It helps me out a ton. Helps me put out more content, and that way you guys will also be notified every time I put out a new video. And number two, if you guys are thinking about doing anything with real estate around the Boston area, whether it's buying, selling, investing, whatever it is, I still can't believe how many calls I get from you guys watching my videos. Still blows my mind. So if you're thinking about doing anything, I love getting calls. Hit me up and I will definitely help you out. So with that, let's jump right into it, and we're gonna start in terms of how things have changed in living in Boston in 2021. We're gonna start with answering probably one of the most obvious questions, right? And that's, are people still living in Boston, right? I mean, you might have read headlines, if you're not from Boston, you might have read headlines about how other major cities are seeing a huge outflux of people, right? AKA New York City, some of the big cities in California, right? A lot of them have had a lot of residents pack their bags and move right out to areas in the South like Texas and Florida. Now, in Boston, I would say there certainly have been people that have done that. I'm not gonna say no one's done that, but I would say it's definitely on a much lower scale than what New York City and California have been experiencing, right? So if you walk around the city today, it is still hustling and bustling. There's still tons of people living here, right? There's no like major outflux of people packing their bags and saying, you know what, I'm getting the heck out of Boston. That's just not really happening. Now, in terms of maybe locally moving, that is happening, right? As I've talked about in other videos, a lot of people that have traditionally lived in the city, are exploring options and moving into the suburbs around the Boston area, and that's for reasons for maybe getting more square footage, right? Since they're working at home, they don't necessarily need to live in the city, and maybe they want to experience the suburbs. They want more yard space, more privacy. So yeah, you're seeing some influx from Boston into suburbs. That's certainly happening. But from Boston, to like out of state, I would say that's definitely happening at a much lower scale than other major cities. Now, your next question though might be, well, okay, that's great, but is there still stuff going on within Boston, right? Are there things to do if I move there or if I'm living there? Is there stuff going on? Am I gonna have a good time? And the answer is, in short, yes, right? Stuff is still going on in Boston. Now, I will say a lot of it, of course, is more focused on the outdoors. Obviously with everything going on with COVID right now. So if you walk, if you take a weekend, even in the middle of January, right? I was just outside this past weekend, and you go down into the city, whether you're in the Back Bay, the South End, you're gonna see a lot of people walking outside. It's not like the city's dead. There's just been a lot more priority on outdoor things, right? So even where I live in South Boston, you see tons of people on the weekend walking by the ocean, going to Castle Island, and that's really this common thread all over Boston, right? Yes, there's still stuff going on, but again, with COVID, everyone wants to be more sensitive to it, so there's a lot more stuff going on outdoors. Though, if you do want to go to restaurants and bars, believe me, they're still open. I still see some restaurants getting pretty slammed up as they possibly can. There's still things moving, still things happening, and yes, there's still activity going on. Now, in the suburbs, it's actually also pretty similar. As in the city, again, you see a lot of people outside, walking by ponds, reservations, just trying to be outside with everything going on with COVID. Same thing with the restaurants, in the suburbs, they are still getting pretty good activity. I'd say you probably see a little bit more takeout in the suburbs rather than people going into the restaurants like in the city. But they are still active, hustling and bustling. So life continues in the city and in the surroundings. Now, the next question you might ask is, okay, well, stuff is going on in Boston and the surroundings, but what about the rest of New England? Can I still explore the rest of New England? Because I've gotten a lot of calls from you guys that are thinking about moving to the Boston area from different parts of the country. And one of the big draws, of course, is not only Boston, but, access to the rest of New England, like Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, other parts of Massachusetts, like the Cape. And again, the answer here is, like I said, life is going on. People are still doing things, right? Over the summer, if you went to the beaches, they were still very, very busy. I went to the beaches in the Cape, by the Cape. I went beaches up in the North Shore, and I can tell you, people were still outside. If you went to different reservations or hiking trails, they still had a lot of people, being active, doing stuff outside. I personally went up to Maine 2 times, once in the summer, once in the fall. It was still very active and bustling. I'm actually planning another trip to Maine. Even for things like ski trips, I know lots of people are doing those. So if you're a big ski person, I personally am not. I cannot ski for my life. But if you are a big ski person, I know resorts are still open. You can still go up, hit the trails, hit the mountains, or whatever the expression is. Again, I'm not a ski person. When someone asks me if I ski, I just tell them I tube. But things are still open, things are still moving. And I expect as the spring and summer hit, in the next couple months, we're gonna continue to see that trend. Everyone's gonna be super excited to really have the warm weather and continue to be outdoors. So yes, the rest of New England is still active, still bustling. So if that's a big priority for you, it is still available. Now let's talk a little bit more local and talk about traffic here, right? Obviously, if you've heard Boston being mentioned in conversations, probably one of the things you've heard about is Boston has just been terrible for traffic. And that was very, very much the case pre-COVID. Again, Boston is a very old city, probably was not designed geographically as best as it should have, if we're being completely honest. There's a famous meme you've probably seen, like New York versus Boston, and it says like Boston, the roads are kind of curvy, and New York, everything's nice and parallel, and it says Boston because, blank you. But yeah, traffic here, pre-COVID was definitely pretty bad. Since COVID has hit, in the summer, it was actually very, very quiet. Now, since we've kind of ramped back up a little bit in the late summer and fall, we've definitely seen traffic pick up, certainly nowhere near pre-COVID levels. And honestly, a lot of people think that even once we kind of get out of this COVID world, we may not necessarily go back to the same levels of traffic, just because there's so many people now that are probably going to be working remotely, at least part-time. So we expect this kind of, pre-COVID traffic levels not to hit back up, and hopefully it won't take us an hour to travel 7-10 miles around the area moving forward. Now, let's talk a little about housing prices and affordability. Like many different parts of the country, since COVID has hit, real estate prices in some areas have kind of stayed stagnant, whereas in other areas they've completely blown up, right? So in terms of the latter part where they've blown up, that's really been the suburbs around here. So if you're thinking about moving here and trying to buy a single family within 20-30 minutes, it is a very, very competitive market right now. You're probably, to get a basic starter single family, 1,200-1,300 square feet within 20-30 minutes of Boston, you are probably going to be starting at least at $500,000. You're realistically probably going to have to push that price if you want anything closer to 2,000 square feet and in good condition. For that kind of price, for that kind of home, you're going to be paying probably around $700,000-800,000 and higher, depending on the exact location. The suburbs have just, like I said, have been incredibly hot. Some areas have experienced growth of as much as 10% since COVID. So that's definitely been the most desirable. Now, within the city, if you've seen my other videos, I've talked about how the city condo market has kind of been stagnant. as weak as it's been in a very long time. But don't get me wrong, the city is still extremely expensive. I mean, you've got homes in the Back Bay selling at about $1,500 per square foot. It is expensive stuff here. I actually bought a home in a neighborhood in Boston, South Boston, and I ended up paying close to $1,000 per square foot. So, you know, even though prices haven't dropped by any means, right? They kind of stayed stagnant. It is still quite expensive around the Boston area. So make sure you're accounting for that if you're thinking about moving here. So finally, the million-dollar question that a lot of you are probably thinking about is, well, okay, Lior, that's all fine and well, but tell me this, is it actually still worth moving to Boston today? And I would say, heck, yes it is. Boston's still one of my favorite cities on the planet. I mean, you just don't really get a city like Boston. It's kind of a big city, but it kind of has a small city feel to it. It's not as busy, it's not as loud and busy as other major cities like New York or LA. You know, it's got the charm, it's got all the historical stuff here. It's super fun, right? There's so many things to do. You've got all of New England still at your access and available, right? You've got Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, you've got the Cape, you've got Western Mass. I mean, there's just so many things here to do. So my short answer is it's still very much worth it moving to Boston, living here. I absolutely love it. I know many people that just love Boston and will never move out of here. So that would be my answer to you about that. So hopefully that's helpful, guys. Hopefully that makes some sense. If you guys have any questions, any thoughts about anything I talked about in this video, just make sure to put your comments below and I will help you out.